I think there will be unrest, but I don't really think it's going to be that bad. I think it will subside. I don't think it's going to go on and on and on. I think it's going to be sharp, brief, and short-lived.
Hey everyone, this is Elijah K. Johnson with the Miles Franklin Market Update. And with us today, one of our favorite guests, one of the top silver markets experts as well, David Morgan from the Morgan Report. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Elijah, it's always fun to be with you. Thanks for having me back.
Awesome. Well, I first wanted to discuss, obviously, the precious metal markets. Tomorrow's the election. I think you've stated that pretty much regardless of the outcome, you see precious metals going higher.
I do. I was asked actually 4 years ago in a Canadian interview, probably about a month before the election last time, if Donald Trump was elected, what that would mean to the price of gold. And my answer was, that there could be a lot of, it would be like the captain of the Titanic, basically with Trump at the helm. You might see livelier music, steerage comes up to first class, more free champagne, more handouts, perhaps a better job climate, and that type of thing, but the ship's going down regardless. And that was my answer. And my answer is still similar. I think if the Democrats get in, that you might see a ramp up faster, perhaps, to a higher gold price, but that'd be temporary. I think the long-term view is an economically based financial conundrum that cannot be fixed. We cannot print our way out of this. The more free money that's printed, the more funny money that enters the system, the more the trust in the system degrades. So I think the election might have a very short-term effect, but the major trend is gold and silver prices will make up for the problem areas. And it's basically, and I'll give a shout out to Martin Armstrong. I mean, Marty's very bright, and he does, I think, a more balanced view that some of the gold bugs might not agree with. But as an Austrian student, printing money, making the M1, 2, or 3 larger is by definition inflation. But that doesn't guarantee the price of gold will go commensurate with it. It could go into the stock market, it could go into vaults, it could go on the bank's balance sheets and remain static. In other words, it's as if it doesn't exist. If I gave you $10 million and you put all of it in the safe and didn't open it for 10 years, it's as if it never really happened. And that's a metaphor for what's happened earlier, not now, but earlier in the banking system, especially after the 2008 financial crisis, where almost all of the stimulus went to balance the bank's balance sheets or help them to reliquify them going on to Main Street. Now, since they're not getting inflation and there's all this hardship due to this crisis, there is direct payments. They're talking about UBI and everything else. So I know I've said a lot, but I think it's important for people to put it in proper context, because I've said for a long time, Elijah, that we are getting a point of no return. We've crossed that threshold. The Rubicon has been crossed, and we're entering a new paradigm. How will gold and silver react? I think they will react. In fact, they may overreact, meaning on a paper paradigm basis, they will be far more valuable in purchasing power than they are now. But how will it end? I don't know. Will there be a nationalization like there was in the 30s, where you've got gold and silver, but you nasty speculator, we're going to give you, a penalty on a tax basis or something like that? I don't know. I would not rule that out. I don't think confiscation's really in the cards, although it's possible. I can't rule it out entirely. So I said a lot, but I think the main point being is that gold and silver are a lot further to go. And they will, in all times past, they have maintained purchasing power for all of the errors made by fiat money printing. I think they'll do it again. Pretty sure that they will, but that doesn't mean to bet the farm. All you really need is a hedge, and that should protect you as this transition takes place.
No, moving closer to the short term, as we look to the election tomorrow, we've talked about this before, how there's a lot of uncertainty leading into this election. And also, there's been social unrest and all of that. I was actually just at the store the other day, and there was a long line for toilet paper. People again seem to be concerned of, as we're heading into the winter, kind of like, oh, maybe, I don't know if they're thinking we're going to have shutdowns again, but they're getting supplies, right? So what is your perspective as we enter the rest of today and tomorrow, and possibly who knows when we actually have the results of the election? What do you see coming for this country?
Wow. Well, let me just interject for the next 2 months. I really don't see gold and silver going that much higher. I mean, silver hit a print of about $30 this year. And we're about 24 right now as we're doing the interview. I don't think you'll see 30 again this year. I could be wrong. I do think as far as the country, I'm actually more of a moderate. I'm usually in the middle. I'm usually not at the extreme right or left. I'm sure people with a certain perspective would see me that way. But I think if you did a 30,000-foot overview and look down, you'd see me more or less more of the, more in the middle. But regardless, I think there will be unrest. I think there will be some burning. But I don't really think it's going to be that bad. I think it will subside. I don't think it's going to go on and on and on. I think it's going to be sharp, brief, and short-lived. I hope I'm right, and it's not wishful thinking. That's what I truly think. If I'm wrong, I'll admit it. That doesn't mean that all the strife and gnashing of teeth and unhappy people is going to go away. But as far as the overreaction to destroy things, unfortunately, I see that happening, but I don't see it to the level of it accelerates. I see it as a sharp spike and then subsides. We'll see. Now, that doesn't mean the rhetoric will go away. It doesn't mean that the campaigning for, the never Trumpers or whatever it is, if he's in, or, the people that are unhappy with the other party or whatever, that's not going to go away. But as far as actual physical problems with needing to stock up now, I think is valid. And I think in the longer term, it's going to be necessary because of the supply chain breakdown across the board and food shortages that are irrefutably happening. But as far as a lot of social unrest, I do think it'll subside. And let's just look at that a little bit deeper, Elijah. I mean, it's not, if you have a serious food shortage, and that's all you're thinking about is not, what your next job is, but where your next meal is coming from. How much energy you're going to have to go out there and start protesting some political party. I mean, I try to ignore the political class, really, but that's just me and some others, kind of the intellectual type that look at beyond what's on the mainstream media to pacify the masses as far as this one red, that one blue, 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 red, red, red. I mean, it's, to my perspective, it's not the most meaningful part of how we live our lives. I just did an interview with E.B. Tucker, and he talked about not having a television. And I was in that situation for many, many years. I have televisions now, mostly watch documentaries, but regardless of my personal viewing habits, I don't like the programming that goes on from the television set. And that's why when I do use mine, it's very seldom on any mainstream channel whatsoever. It's usually to listen to YouTube, visualize it, or watch a documentary. So hopefully I killed that one. I hopefully wanted to make people aware that do what you can do, be more independent, think critically, and don't rely too much on outside influence. I know it's really hard in today's social media driven world where everyone cares about what everyone thinks and where they're eating and what they're wearing and where they're going and all that stuff. But really what's important is really the basics. And we're going to be forced into that. We're actually being forced into that right now. So probably spark some ideas for you, Elijah. Back to you.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things I've been thinking about is if we look at the beginning of the pandemic, we saw a lot of people, rush to the stores and there were a lot of shortages. What is a prudent way to prepare that will be all right for the system as well? Because I know, we don't need, people rushing and, people to talk about hoarding and stuff like that. But at the same time, we do need to prudently prepare. So what are some maybe prudent steps we can take to prepare in a way that's going to be healthy for the system?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if your viewers will like the answer or not, but I'm very sincere with what I'm about to say. One of my favorite expressions, I've said this in other interviews, is chance favors the prepared mind. So if you're mentally prepared, if you could adjust your attitude to, look, things are going to change, and they're going to change in ways that no one can see coming. But I am flexible. I'm anti-fragile. I can adapt, and people can adapt. And you have an attitude that whatever is thrown at me, I'll be able to weather it. I'll be able to get through it. I'll be able to adapt, change, etc. That's really more key than having a big pile of emergency food in your closet. It's your ability to mentally, emotionally adapt to whatever's thrown at you. So I think that's number one. Number two, I think, is to be willing to understand that for the most part, lifestyles are going to change across the board, meaning that, the McMansion days for the middle class are probably over. The ability to buy any kind of food stuff any time of the year are probably going to end rather soon. The ability to go anywhere you want, travel is going to be curtailed. So a lot of things are changing. We know they're already happening with this crisis that has started from March onward. More control by the authority figures, more authoritarianism across the board, whether you want to call it whatever label-ism you want to put on it. The facts remain that that's happening and will continue. That trend will continue. So I think control what you can. Eat, healthily. I think it's prudent to have some savings, and it's not necessarily in gold and silver. I think that's, one or two or three tiers up. I mean, the main thing is to be able to provide for your family if you can. If you're out of work, look for something that maybe you can do that would benefit yourself and others. It's hard in some circumstances. I'm quite cognizant of that. But look around and see what your assets really are. And they're not always what your last job was. I mean, someone that does data entry that's no longer doing it might have a skill set in something else that they really have a passion about that will be of value to let's call it the new paradigm. So mentally prepared and emotionally prepared is number one. Having some extra food if you have the ability to do so, being able to adapt, ask for help, and also be willing to do something new. So I think those are the most important. Having, a backup reserve of, food's not a bad idea. But again, if you're not mentally prepared, it may go by the side. And, having precious metals is certainly a way to transition some of your financial or your wealth into the new paradigm. But it's not as important, in my view, than having the right attitude. I mean, there'll be people, and I've said this in other interviews, that may have a pretty good hoard of precious metals that won't be able to cope with the new paradigm because they lost their, real estate fortune because they didn't get paid rent, or the government changed the tax policy or whatever. So there's so many things out there in the near future and the distant future that we are, one, unable to control, and two, very difficult to predict.
One last topic I wanted to discuss with you is, how do you see the stock market being impacted by the election?
Whoa, that's a good one. Yeah, I think the stock market may even react a little more short term to the election than the precious metals. But again, I could be proven wrong. I think the stock market is pretty much looking at the future, which it always does. And if the party claiming to, go after a stronger tax base is elected, I think that would have a lot more repercussions to the downside of the stock market than if the other party got elected. People don't like uncertainty. That's why the metals will do well regardless of what happens in the election. And the stock market's reaction to uncertainty is usually to the downside. So either party, I think the market's going to go down eventually. But I do think that if Biden were to get in, that the stock market would go down almost instantly. We'd have to see.
Well, David Morgan, thank you so much for joining us today. If people are interested in learning more, where can they find you, and any last thoughts you'd like to add?
Sure. The morganreport.com is the best place to go. And when you're on there, remember that, there's just basically a sign-up page for the free newsletter. And then there is a paid service that you can explore on the subscribe tab. But go to the blog. I mean, we do all the interviews I do, and we're writing more. So there's something to read every week on the blog. So there's written stuff, there's interviews, there's videos and audios, and it's all free. So I just want to make that available to everybody. Make sure that they visit. And of course, we don't mind if you subscribe to the video feed and also the Twitter feed or whatever. It does help us out. I'm not a big, subscribe and click the bell and pass it on to all your friends and neighbors. But if you do, it doesn't hurt. We do appreciate it. So I'll leave it at that, Elijah. And thanks again for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, David, and God bless.
God bless you as well.